Hello and welcome to another expert episode of the Daten-WG podcast. And yeah, sometimes when we have Power BI in place, I experience it for years. The people, I think maybe the second question they're asking is, how can I write back? How can I input some data in? And why it is like this and how we can solve it. Today I invited a real expert on this topic. John Vöge is here. Nice to meet you, John.
Thank you for the invitation and yeah, WriteBack is the name of the game, right? I think you're right. There's a huge demand for that kind of solution, which is a little interesting given the nature of Power BI as a reporting tool, right? But yeah, lots to discuss there.
Yeah, I also tried to explain, hey, Power BI is for reporting. It's not for planning or for write back. But for me, the reason is because before the same people did everything in Excel, and in Excel they can input the data, they can manage the data, even if they shouldn't. I think we can agree on this.
And one of the big value propositions of Power BI in general is you'll be able to get rid of some of your Excel sheets, right?
Yeah,
And I'll be the first to defend Excel. I think there are many great use cases, but
yeah, me
there are
too.
also times where Excel is being used like a pseudo database almost, and it's definitely not fit for that purpose, right? That's where I think Excel hell as a term truly derives from. Naturally coming up with alternative solutions to those very input heavy Excel sheets. That's yeah, I think a very logical consequence when users move into the world of Power BI. And of course, we will probably touch on that today. There are many different types of write-back solutions, right?
Yeah.
Translytical task flows being the most recent, but it could also be write back with something like Power Apps, or it could be through completely external tools, visuals in Power BI, or external tools altogether.
Yeah, and I used all of them, and I think you too. So I still remember when the Power Automate visual came out for Power BI back then, and then I like built a, like some kind of simple write back when I filter something and then just push the button and write back to, yeah, to be honest, in Excel and SharePoint.
Right,
Maybe not the best yeah, data holding system, but for a short demo it worked. So
right.
what would you actually say? So you have several talks about on this topic,
Mm.
especially the write back topic in Power BI. And when we agree, then that there is a need. So you cannot deny that there is a need in the market for such solutions. So would you say now Translytical is there, we should use Translytical for everything?
I think to arrive at that conclusion, we need to evaluate the alternatives briefly, right? So maybe it makes
Mm,
sense to just outline briefly what are the
yeah,
different options here. So translytical task flows is the new kind of solution for this kind of issue. Um, Maybe let's just motivate why WriteBack in Power
yeah,
BI in general. I think the motivation, the idea, the reason why it's a good idea is to get people out of Excel for that kind of sort of data input exercise.
yeah,
Why is that a good idea? Well, I'll take an example. The last customer I built a WriteBack solution for, finance department, 250 people who on a monthly basis needed to input numbers on their forecasted spend in the coming month, so that they knew how much money do I as a company need to get out of pocket next month. They did this in Excel. They were distributing an Excel sheet to 250 employees, expecting to get this data back at the end of the month, so they could forecast the next month. I mean, you can take a guess at how many of those 250 users did that on time, did it correctly,
mm,
or even did it in the right file, because sometimes they had old versions of the Excel
yeah,
file sitting there. Sometimes they would be filling data into the Excel sheet in the wrong data format, and sometimes they would just not fill it out at all, right? So that was the
yeah,
problem, the baseline. The solution that we built was to provide them with a Power BI report with write-back capabilities, where they would log into this. Well, they would get automated email notifications saying, Now you have 5 days left to go, 3 days left to go. Today is the deadline. You need to fill it in with a link to the Power BI report. Row-level security in the Power BI report would automatically filter the report so they could see all the items they were responsible for. They would click an item, and they would have a WriteBack window in the Power BI report where they could just input this data right away, click submit, and they would get a nice little green check mark next to the item in the Power BI report. So it acted as like a checklist for them on a monthly basis.
Okay.
So it was a much cleaner solution, and the data just arrives straight into your database in the right format every time. And at the right time, given if people they accept their reminders, right? So it's that
Okay.
business problem that we're trying to solve. We're trying to optimize, a problem where both timeliness and data quality is an issue.
So how do you build this, particularly this solution? Because it sounds really big, lots of people and these big tables actually with lots of cells.
Yeah, not necessarily such a big solution. The semantic model that this Power BI report is using just had a dimension of all the purchase orders that they needed to input values for, forecasted values for.
Mm,
And then there was a destination table for the write-back data where they were writing in the forecast values. So not very wide tables. It was actually a very, very simple data setup.
yeah.
And then, of course, once the data is in the database, we can use that, transform it, use it in our dimensional models in the rest of the organization. The solution in this case was a Power App for WriteBack, but it could just as well have been a Translytical Task Flow or a third-party tool. And just to sort of
Yeah.
compare those options briefly.
Yeah, so for me, some rule of thumb is, especially this case like yours, I had it in a little bit smaller, also
Sure.
finance forecasting. I used in the InfoRiver
Oh yeah,
external visual for,
right.
because to me it seemed like when you have such big tables, then a Power App is more like for one value or for
Mm,
one certain, but maybe you can prove me wrong. InfoRiver had some, yeah, the advantage that it actually looks like Excel, and
yeah.
for people it was easy to understand. I have to type in this column and then write it back and also send it to the
I
model.
think the biggest takeaway for anybody listening to this is that there is no one solution that's always the best fit. There are use
Yeah,
cases for
definitely.
all these three
Yeah.
types of write-back solutions: Translytical, Power Apps, and third party. You're hitting the nail on the head. If what you need is like to see a table and be able to do inputs in multiple cells, just like you were doing in Excel, with no change in user behavior, then you need to use a third-party tool like InfoRiver. I know Lumel has one as well. There are many,
Mm,
many write-back visuals actually. There's a lot.
mm.
I know the Acco tools. I was at FabCon in Vienna. I think there was 6 different vendors in the expo with write-back
Yeah.
visuals for Power BI. 6 different,
Wow.
and they are probably
Crazy.
only a fraction of the solutions, right?
Mm,
So third-party tools, third-party visuals in Power BI are great to accommodate stuff like that. The problem is that you, as the owner of your report, of your data, you don't have as much control over the integration with your
yeah.
ecosystem. Often, at least, some of the third-party tools allow some,
Mhm.
control over the backend, but most of it is a little bit of a black box,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
not so
Mm,
customizable. I think, or is
yeah,
that not your experience?
yeah. InfoRiver is go quite well in this terms that you can connect a Fabric warehouse. Also, you
Right,
can connect a lake house, but because of this lakes and the SQL endpoint, I prefer
right,
the warehouse. You can
right.
use service principal, and then it's quite okay because I still model in the warehouse and not in
Right.
InfoRiver.
Right.
But of course, the data is flowing through the US. So for some
Yes.
more conservative companies, I don't know if Denmark is like Germany in these terms.
Yes.
Sovereignty is a big thing, and the
For
data is
sure.
obviously flowing through some
Yeah, yeah,
cloud in InfoRiver because it's synchronized in when I have it in Power BI desktop and in the
yeah,
web,
yeah.
it's the same data. That
And
cannot
then,
come from.
the visual is probably great for that very
Yeah,
narrow use case, but you can only customize it so much, right? So if you have
yeah,
very uh, specific user needs, then all of a sudden maybe it's not a good fit for your infrastructure. There's also the
Yeah,
whole
that's true.
do your
Yeah,
organization even allow third-party visuals in Power BI?
yeah, yeah.
Talking to what you're saying with the network
This
stuff.
would be
Uh,
definitely a showstopper, yes. And I also know what you mean. For example, like comments, you can comment, but it's a very in a standardized way
uh,
and not in some more flexible way. And sometimes it's not that you just fill out something and send it away. Then you have
mm,
some of the next level approval. They
yeah.
need to check, they need to adjust, and then they need to send away. So when you start actually doing this kind of write back, it's
Mm.
not only about the tech, it's about the whole process.
And I think a final comment about third-party tools as a write-back solution is also that you likely need to pay a license, right?
Yeah.
Usually there's a user-based license fee or something like that that you need to accommodate. But that's the same for Power Apps. And if we take that as sort of
Yeah.
the opposite end of the
Yeah.
extreme, if third-party visuals are like very specific in nature and very uh, they're streamlined, like you don't need to do a whole lot of setup. Power Apps is like the opposite. You need to you can build you can fully decide yourself what it should look like and how user interaction should work, and when I click this button then this happens, and all that kind of flexibility you can build that into a Power App. Again, you need to pay a license fee. All users of your Power App, at least if you're building a proper WriteBack app that writes to a database and not to SharePoint, it's going to require premium licensing for all your end users. You need to
Yeah.
govern the Power Platform. You need to have some kind of structure around how you assign permissions to your app. But when that's done, you have a very flexible solution. You can build an integration into Power BI that is somewhat native. The Power Apps for Power BI visual is a native visual. It doesn't require that your organization accepts third-party visuals. It's Microsoft native. The integration works okay, meaning that even though we're technically just embedding an external app in our Power BI report, it can become context aware. So we can filter in our Power BI report and have the filters propagate to the Power App. We can load data from Power BI into the Power App. We can do instant write back because we can trigger visual refreshes in Power BI from the Power App. So the process
Oh,
when you set up a write back solution with Power Apps can be very, very good if you build it well. The problem, as I see it, with the Power Apps solution is the cost. It's quite expensive to license many users, depending on the size of your organization. Some large enterprises, they just have, as part of their E5 Microsoft Office licenses, they also have Power Apps. Then it's a great solution. For smaller organizations, it can be a large cost to assume.
yeah,
Uh,
but that's also the reason I see even bigger companies, they
mm,
somewhat struggle with this premium licenses, and that's why they're using like SharePoint lists
yeah,
for export destinations for Power Apps, and just to hey, you're like a big company with
right,
50,000 of employees, and not
right,
everyone is planning.
right.
Making a lot of revenue, and I also know your
Uh,
consulting fees.
uh,
So why you don't
exactly.
buy you some Power Apps licenses? But there are some kinds of regulations they
Um,
cannot do it.
And that's
Mm,
kind of where Translytical comes in, right? Because Translytical is kind of in between those two paradigms of zero flexibility and
mm,
full flexibility, in the sense that Translytical Task Flows is a Power BI and Fabric native feature. It lives only within Fabric. You don't need a third party vendor. You don't need Power Platform licenses. You just need a Fabric capacity. And it works from a solution architecture that's very simple. All you need is Power BI and user data functions. And then some kind for writeback, you need some kind of storage artifact as well. It could be a Fabric lakehouse or warehouse. It could be an Azure SQL DB. It could be a SQL DB in Fabric. You decide for yourself, right? But the solution architecture is really quite simple, and the integration with Power BI feels very, very natural, right? Because we're
yeah,
using the built-in slicers of Power BI to set the context, to set parameter values for a translytical task flow, which in essence is just another way of saying a task flow, a Python flow, a parameterized Python flow executed by a user in Power BI. That's really what it is. And it's what's a little funny, I think. And I always say this when I do talks on the topic. The word translytical, it doesn't really appear anywhere. The only place in the entire platform where you can see it is in the preview settings that you need to enable translytical task flows. But otherwise, inside of Power BI or Fabric, the word translytical doesn't appear anywhere. It's user data functions and it's Power BI that are interacting with each other and with your backend item. So it's all
Yeah.
Fabric. You configure it yourself, have a lot of flexibility on what happens underneath the hood. And then just to briefly talk limitations, the limitation of translytical task flows is definitely in the visual layer. We have a little more flexibility than we do with maybe InfoRiver or the other third-party tools, in that we can decide ourselves which buttons or which inputs get flows into our task flow. But we don't have a lot of different input options. We can use visuals and slicers, calculated measures. That's it. So the problem I always bring up with translytical task flows is, okay, how do you let users input a date?
Yeah. And this is kind of a drawback, definitely,
You
because
can make a drop-down slicer with all your dates. That's not great UX. You could make a between slicer and use a calculated measure to pick up the min and max values, but how do you avoid confusing your user? You could use a free text input slicer, the text slicer, let the user just input the data, the date, and then, well, how do you ensure the date was inputted in the right format? Is it year, month, day, month, year? How do you enforce that? Well, you need to do some data validation on your part, right? So I think, in summary, 3 different WriteBack solutions, each with their drawbacks. Third-party tools, they are very good at the specific thing they are built for, but they are a bit black box with regards to backend. And there's the whole, where is my data going? That's a bit of a question mark. Power Apps, lots of flexibility, maybe not as good at like building tables as you can do with third-party tools, but very flexible UI and UX, good Power BI integration, but you need licensing and you need governance on the Power Platform as a big drawback. And then there's translytical task flows, which is native Power BI and Fabric, which is awesome. But it comes with some limitations in UI and UX. And I think what I forgot to mention is that I kind of snuck it in. It's still a preview feature. So do with it as you want. Don't use it in production right now. And I think that was actually the question you asked me in the beginning. Should we just build translytical right now? I think you should test it out. It's the future of WriteBack. I firmly believe so. It has so many advantages, being as native as it is, and cost-wise, there's just so many advantages. It's ridiculously cheap to run user data functions on your. You can do it all on an F2 capacity, no problem. I'm sure that in the future, this will be one of the major ways we build WriteBack for many different use cases. There will also be use cases where a third-party solution makes sense or Power Apps make sense. But as soon as it goes generally available, I will start pitching translytical as an equal alternative when the right situation arises.
Yeah, I'm already using the
Yeah.
translytical in one project at
Okay.
least. Not like input heavy, but it's a very interesting use case, because when you have InfoRiver in this terms, it's the same. When I write back with InfoRiver and I don't want to use direct query, because direct query feels kind of slow and limits the report, I still have import in place. Maybe I will change to direct lake, but for now it's import. And after the write back in InfoRiver, there is no refresh. So when the people only have reading rights, they cannot refresh the report afterwards. And when I just implement the translytical button as a button, it does nothing but refreshing the data set, and then the report refreshes by
Then they can
itself,
see it.
because of this is quite a small model for just made for planning. The model in a warehouse is bigger, but this particular report and semantic model is very small. So the refresh and import mode is like 2 seconds, and then it triggers the import, and refresh. This is a very cool use case for me, especially because the write management is quite well. When you
Mm.
just give the
The
people
access,
reading and executing
execute.
writes
Mm.
and hide the translytical function in another workspace,
Um,
then it works and they don't even see the workspace. So you could even use service principles there. Of course, you should better use Key Vault for rights management. When you like use some APIs to trigger refreshes, you can do almost everything with Translytical. This is also some
but
great thinkers.
you're making a great point. Translytical is not only for WriteBack, it's
Yeah,
for all kinds of code
yeah,
execution that you'd want your end users to perform. Previously, what you're describing here would require Power Automate as well, right? You could
yeah,
embed a button to refresh your semantic model, and then you would have to license Power Automate to achieve that. Very common use case for Power Automate and Power BI, and now you can do it with Translytical, right? And I also saw one of the program managers for Translytical, Sujata. She had a great presentation together with Mark Carlo at the FabCon, where they showed a
yeah.
couple of
I've
different
been there.
Translytical
Yeah,
solutions, right? And I loved how through a little, it was technically a write-back solution under the hood, but to the end user, it just looked like they had embedded a chatbot in the Power BI report,
yeah,
right? So the user would be able to input a question, click a save button, and then what would happen under the hood is that the user data function would send the question to an LLM and store the result in a SQL DB and visualize both the question and the answer in a card slicer. I think it was. That's very
yeah,
cool, and that just kind of goes to show that you can use translytical task flows for many different things. And even though there might be some write back under the hood that you're writing some data down into a data store somewhere, the end user experience doesn't need to feel very much like write back. It really just allows us to build, translytical apps, right? Power BI becomes more than Power BI reports. It becomes applications. It's much
yeah.
more interactive, and that's a very interesting direction for Power BI to be heading, I think.
Yeah, and it's not only about planning. I think one of the use cases is definitely like master data management. When you see some dimensions, like in the healthcare industry, some recipes or some material stuff, and then you need to update especially one number or to map something, then it's great because just
Yeah.
to select some stuff and write back, this works. But
I've
I
seen
was
it for
also, yeah,
managing row-level security, so saying this
yeah,
user should have access to these
mhm.
regions or products. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
that's
didn't mean to
also a
interrupt.
good, definitely good use case. No, I just want to tell in the FabCon, I also was in this session, and it was kind of cool how they overcame this input problem
Yeah,
we now have because when I tried to use Translytical in another project about commenting
yeah,
of dashboards, then they say, this input with the filter, you do not have any line breaks. It doesn't work for us. So for now, it's like on hold. But when they used it, actually, they typed like in this filter, and Copilot created the real text.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's smart. It's a good workaround to
yeah,
sort of let that format it as well. But maybe it's a good time to then talk about also, what are some of the current limitations of translytical? Because I think there are some, right? To me, you can tell it's a preview feature. There are some things that are a little, I'd say, a little wonky in the development experience, right? And it's stuff like um you don't
yeah,
have collaboration in user data functions right now, so it's very like siloed development. They are kind of
mm,
expecting that it's one developer who's building the Power BI report, and the same developer is building the user data function, and it will never really
no,
change who
yes,
develops this. You can take over the user data function, but it feels like an old paradigm of working with Fabric. Like, why is it not like with notebooks where you can collaborate on
mm,
the code? I think that would have been nice. I also think there's a little bit left to be desired with regards to troubleshooting and logging, in the sense that uh, you can implement a lot of stuff yourself if you import the right libraries into your Python code in your user data function. You can build logging, you can build error handling, data validation, communication to your end user. You need to do all of that. And I think some of that is fine, but I wish that from a developer perspective, that more of the logs were automatically captured. Right now, it's quite a hassle to get started with developing user data functions, and I seriously spent a full day trying to connect to a Fabric warehouse because all the demos I could find were connecting to a Fabric SQL DB. So I tried for a full day to get WriteBack to work to a warehouse, only to discover after 8 hours of banging my head against the wall that all I needed was 3-part naming convention in my SQL statements against the warehouse. I was just missing the first part of the naming convention. For some weird reason, there's a difference in how you refer to warehouses and SQL DBs. Okay, fine. But the reason I couldn't figure that out was because every time I got an error, I just got a stupid non-descriptive error. I was just, oh, your flow failed. And it didn't tell me anything else, right? So I had to implement my own logging and output my error messages into the logs myself. Like I had to set that up before I was able to troubleshoot the error that I got. And I think that's a little weird that I not even from a developer perspective, I can't find the error logs anywhere. It's just going to tell you that something went wrong. So I hope they iron out some of those small things before going generally available. I mean, it's only been in preview for 5 months or so at this point. And given the sort of usual timeline of those features, I would be surprised to see it go generally available before, say, what is it? Is it build in May? Microsoft build we have in May? I think
yes.
I would expect that kind of timeline because I also know they are prioritizing this feature very much. They know it's important to people. They want to keep people in the ecosystem instead of funneling them into to third-party apps and stuff like that, right? So I think they are prioritizing it very heavily. I think they are listening to all the feedback that we're giving. So I'm pretty sure that these, like the developer experience will become better, and I'm sure the end user experience will become better when we get more input options and stuff like that. So I think it feels like a preview feature still, and I would be hesitant myself to use it in production. But of course, for some use cases, it will work perfectly fine. And frankly, one of the things I'm pretty impressed about is the performance. Like it's very fast. The first WriteBack action, or the first action, you can feel it needs to spin up a node for the user data function to run. But when it's running, it's lightning fast, and it's like almost no matter what I throw at it. I don't have any benchmarking done. I should do that, but it's very fast. I love that.
Yeah, but I can also confirm that the first one is maybe a little bit slower, but when I can use it like for like 30 users to refresh a model in import mode the whole day, and it's just fast. It doesn't like bother with waiting, but I also feel you about the limitations. I encountered these two, and like the just does not working. No feedback, no logs.
Yeah, there's a little bit about moving between Power BI desktop and the Power BI service that's necessary. Because what's a little funny is that Translytical Task Flows, they kind of work the best with the new slicers, so the list button and text slicer. And while I think the button slicer just went generally available here in the October update, but the other two are still in preview. And what that means is that they are not available in the service yet. So they are only available in Power BI desktop, which sounds fine. Okay, I'll build my Translytical Task Flow and my Power BI report in Power BI desktop. The problem is when you then go to try and test your Translytical Task Flow, it becomes really slow to do in desktop. Every time you run your task flow, it needs to refresh your semantic model to get new metadata. And I don't know, it's so slow. So you want to test your report in the service, but you can't really set it up in the service properly. So there's also something with the developer experience there that's not so good right now. But yeah, those are minor hiccups.
Yeah, but it's still, and I still believe it will not be like the developer of the BI report will be the developer of
No, I
the
don't think so either.
functions, because
No.
I think this is the main benefit. And when they're well named, you can just pick and have some simple functions, and
Yes.
it's so good for self-service users to check. Oh, okay, this is a write back for this.
That's
This
a good
is
idea.
commenting.
Yeah, I
This is
hadn't thought about
refresh.
that. Like a library of user
Yeah,
data functions
yeah,
you can
yeah.
just use.
Like
Yeah.
you have some kind of shop for transactions,
And that's
and
maybe one of the biggest perks, I think, of Translytical
yeah,
Task Flows is how easy it is to set up in Power BI. Once you have the
yeah,
data function, it's so nice the way that when you add a button in Power BI and you point it to a Translytical Task Flow to a user data function, it just appears with, okay, now you need to set the values for these 5 parameters, and you just go map them to your slicers, to your measures, whatever. That's so good. That's what I'm talking about when I
yeah,
say that it feels like native Power BI. I mean, it is, but it has that kind of nice touch to it that you would expect from a professional software, right? Uh,
yeah.
that's very
So
nice.
we definitely can keep. So it depends still holds. So when you have some big
Always.
tables need some standards, external tools, maybe the way. When you need more flexibility, like lots of parameters, really custom design,
Yeah.
long texts, then Power Apps is great. Translytical is the native feature that
Yeah.
will be usable for everyone, and like democratizing this whole activity stuff in Power BI. And
I think
it's
so.
definitely the future, as you say,
Yeah.
but we should
And
not
I think
expect
we've
it to be GA
only
tomorrow.
and I just think we've only scratched the surface of the use cases you could imagine
Yeah.
with this, right? So I'm very excited to see what will come out of the community as well in the future on this. Right now, I think it's quite limited, the amount of content about translytical task flows out there, and most of it is about WriteBack. But I'm very excited
Mm.
to see. I mean, I forget his name now, but there was an amazing example of translytical task flow where
Sudoku,
some,
right?
yeah, the Sudoku. I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck is happening here? That was so cool. I'm
I
so
have a
sad
link in
to.
the show
Yeah,
notes.
you
I
should
do
do that.
not have the
That's
name right now, but I
such
know
a
what
cool use
know
case.
what
Yeah.
you mean. It was
Yeah.
fantastic. It's in the
Like,
community stuff where
yeah,
also the community notebooks are. So
exactly.
just linkable. You can test it.
Yeah,
It's a fantastic use case.
yeah,
I always wanted to use Azure Functions in Power BI,
yeah.
but it was like you need to trigger Power Automate, then it triggers Logic Apps, then it triggers. It's such a long way before, and now it's native.
uh,
Fantastic.
and
And
and I think that's a good way to say it, right? It's essentially like
yeah.
being able to trigger Azure functions in Power BI. It's just now user data functions in Fabric. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and even if we talked a lot about tech stuff, I just want to spend a few minutes on another topic on community,
Sure.
because I noticed in your blog that you have organized an event, and you have a very great summary how it was, the Fabric Symposium, and I just want to shout out
Thank you.
for this.
Yeah, I think I'm so happy you've read that blog post. It's but you're right. I host an event here in Denmark called Fabric Symposium, which originally was just an idea that came to mind because I was talking to a lot of people who were starting up Fabric projects, but they had no frame of reference. They didn't know anybody else who was working with Fabric, or they hadn't seen any solutions in production, and they were like, "What are the others doing?" That was the general sort of idea. And so came this idea of this symposium where the people who are working with Fabric today, even though maybe they just started out, maybe it's POCs, maybe they're still testing, it's not in production, maybe it is in production, but giving them a place to share their actual experiences with Fabric without sort of we don't want idiots like me coming to present about translytical task flows only if there's an actual, like, I want to see a case where somebody's doing it. Like that was kind of the premise. And it should be explained by the people who are building the solutions, and it should be very sort of community based. So that was the idea. And yeah, we're now going to have the second edition in a month from the day
Cool.
we're recording this on November 27th. We're having the second
Oh,
edition. Last year was great, but it also was the first time I was arranging a data conference, a 1 day conference, I guess you could say. It's a little strange. I have a background in arranging music festivals.
oh, wow.
So I thought I can arrange a data conference. Turns out those are quite different beasts. I mean, even stuff like I remember some of the feedback that I got last year was like, you should really try and instruct your speakers in how to hold a microphone. Because and that was kind of funny, right? Because the Symposium idea was that we're going to put people on stage who are not used to being on stage. They are developers. So, but I didn't consider that they might not know how to hold a microphone. So that, like, there was lots of small learnings like that, and I just really appreciated so much that I got a lot of feedback. Luckily, also a lot of positive feedback, but I also got a lot of ideas for improvement, and that's where that blog post came in. I wanted to document it for myself, make an honest reflection, what was nice and what was not so nice about this event I had created, so that hopefully I can make this year's event even better. And I think, yeah, it turned into a quite nice blog post around how to sort of get started with those kinds of events. And yeah, I'm happy that somebody like you read it, even though it's just an event that you didn't go to, right?
Yeah, for me it was just like preparing the session, and then I recognized lots of stuff about the
Yeah.
Daten-WG event in March
Journey.
we
Yeah.
have did. So we also had this learnings like, oh, we need presenters, and then
Yes.
I ran to a store and bought some presenters for the speakers. Oh, we need some
Yeah.
electricity there. And
Yeah.
all
Exactly.
this stuff, you should not underestimate it, even if you have connections and you have great names, especially here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
great companies, and also some MVPs and Benny from Microsoft, and
Yeah.
like cool speakers.
Yeah.
But it's
You
only
still need.
half the battle. And
Yeah.
then when you say, "Oh, maybe I should pay the hotel for speakers," and, oh man,
Oh, exactly. Another learning from last year was just that our event day was way too long. So initially I thought, the people who are going to come to the event, it's going to be locals. They're all going to be from Copenhagen and Denmark, and it's just going to be a small local event. So I was a little ambitious. That was programmed from 8:30 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. It's quite a long
yeah,
day. What I didn't anticipate was that, I mean, there were people traveling for 5 hours to come to the event. How does people
yeah,
travel 5 hours to get to an event that starts at 8:30? Well, they need to
yeah.
get there the night before. How do they get home? Well, they're gonna leave at 3 o'clock. They're not gonna stay until 5. So this year we're shortening it a little. We're making the sessions a
Okay.
little shorter. We're shortening the event a little, trying to make it a little less of a long day and focus on the time, that the good time we have, rather than just
Okay.
taking as much time as possible. So that's also something we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's cool. So I wish you lots of
Thank you.
success with this, and I will try to publish this episode actually before maybe the next one. I
Even
just noted
yeah,
to
yeah.
make it possible,
There are still
because I'm
tickets. Maybe there still is when you publish this. We'll see.
yeah. So I'm still looking forward, because I really appreciate such community initiatives, because I know quite well how it is, and I
Oh,
still have time until October the 26th, when I want to do
exactly.
my second run of the Daten-WG
Hmm.
event. But yeah, I know all this, and you're also very open in the blog about the costs and the ticket
Yeah.
prices, how you
Yes.
calculate it, and that's
Exactly.
lots of valuable stuff. Definitely recommendable. I will
Appreciate it.
link it down below, so just check it out. Anyone who's interested in some grassroots events and real community spirit, check out Fabric Symposium, and Copenhagen is, I think, always worth a visit. Just go there. Yeah, fantastic, John. So thanks for your expertise and
Of course.
all this input, and all the best for your event and
Thank you
upcoming
so much.
speeches. I hope maybe meet again, and maybe we can talk about events longer, or about
That would be fun.
anything else
We'll have
about
a talk to hear how
yeah.
this year's event went. Yeah.
Yeah, this would be also fantastic. Yes. So all the best, and see you again. Thanks for listening, for everyone, and stay just hit the subscribe button and the like, stars, and anything buttons. You know it. So see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.